Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Future of Team podcast. My name is James Giroux, and I am joined by my awesome, amazing, wonderful co-host, Teal. Hi, Dee.
Hi, James. Nice to be here today, as always.
It is starting. The weather has changed to the point now here where it has gone from the cool, warmish bit of
Yeah.
spring to the hot bit of spring right before it's officially summer. It is nice, but we've got flies now in the house, and that is not cool. But
Well, I live in Australia, so there are screens, so we don't get the fly situation in house. But we have the opposite, of course.
yeah.
So it is cooling down. It's getting wet. It's not as wet as it normally is. So I don't hate that, but I'm sure the farmers are not loving it. But yeah, we're definitely closing in on Melbourne winter, which is cold and dark, and everybody walking around in black and big puffy coats and moaning about the fact that it's cold. But of course, none of us want to live anywhere else. So
Oh, well, this episode, we thought we'd do something a little bit different. So rather than having some big topic that we were going to do, we've just finished a couple of episodes on feedback and performance improvement, which were big episodes, big topics to talk about. We thought we would do like a bit of a react episode where
yeah.
we look at what's going on online and in the world of work, and we have a bit of a reaction to it. And this is something that Dee had mentioned a little while ago, this article or tweet that somebody had made called the 11 Promises from a Manager. And we thought it would be fun to go through each of these 11 promises and react, respond, give our own 2 cents on what we think about it, and share some stories.
Come on.
So, without any further ado, let's jump into this. The person that wrote this tweet, it went viral, is called Matthew Rex. And so he wrote this thread, and he's got these 11 promises that he'll do as a manager. And yeah, he starts with this one, and I'll just read it out. It is, we'll have a weekly one-on-one. I'll never cancel this meeting, but you can cancel it whenever you like. It's your time.
That's the critical part of it, right? It's your time. And I think the wider question or the wider sort of context around something like this is, what is a one-to-one for, right? What is a one-to-one for? I love it. I love that sense of, I know I'm going into my manager. I know that this time is there for me, how things are going with me, there is a sense too, with this is where your touch point and you're evaluating how people are doing and how they're achieving what they need to be achieving. But that sense of, I'm here for you, is, I think, the critical part of that line, and I guess underscores kind of, I guess, what we would probably call the culture of the whole rest of the 12 items that they, or 11 items that Matthew outlines.
I think there is, for me, like a one-on-one is a couple of things, right? Like for me, if I'm starting a new role, it is my confidence boost of the week. It is my check-in. Am I on the right track? Am I doing what I need to be doing? Am I missing the mark on anything? And it's a chance for my people lead, my manager to come in and be able to say, no, you're okay, you've got it, or let's tweak this, or let's do that, which I find very helpful as somebody who struggles a lot with imposter syndrome, struggles a lot with insecurity about whether I'm doing the right thing in the right way at the right time, right? Like I have confidence in my skill set, and I do kind of know what I'm talking about, but I like that check, especially when it's about ways of working, right? Like, oh, you might know how to do that great in your last role, but in this space, we
This
do it
is
this
how
way.
we do it. This is our spin on it. I think that the demonstration of this is the difference between top-down leadership and servant leadership, right? In a top-down leadership situation, you're coming into a one-to-one and you're there as the manager to make sure that your person is doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. Whereas in a servant leadership situation, while all of those things are things that you are interested in as a manager and as a, someone who represents the company and wants the company to succeed, wants your team to succeed, when you're a servant leader and you're coming in with that sense of, I'm here for you, and I want to make sure, James, that you are getting that confidence boost that you need at the beginning of the week. That's the difference in tone between what Matthew says around here, at least for me, what Matthew says around here's what this meeting is about.
I like that I'll never cancel this meeting, but you can cancel it whenever you like. In
Mm-hmm.
that statement, there's a lot being communicated. It is that, and it's something I struggled with. Like in past roles, canceling one-on-ones, it didn't happen often, but it always became this message I was sending, whether I intended it or not. And I think in the early days, I probably didn't intentionally or understand the messaging that I was sending. But as a manager, as a manager, to my reports was something else is more important than you are.
Exactly.
And I learned very early on that I can't do that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
There is not, regardless of what it is, even if it's the CEO coming in, right, and saying something, like they ask you for your availability in the most part, right?
Yeah.
Like these
Yeah.
other important meetings will ask for and look for your availability before scheduling. And because I'm always nervous about these kinds of things, there were in the early days some times where I was like, well, this big meeting is happening. It's cross departmental. It's involving 3 layers of leadership. Like, I really need to go to that. And so I need to cancel this because they're not offering 2 times for this meeting. They're only offering it once. So sometimes those happen, and you can reschedule a one-on-one. I've done that a number of times. But yeah, that predictability and that sense of, no, I'm always going to carve out space for you is really important.
Yeah.
The second item, or the second law, if you will, or promise from a manager, is our one-on-one agenda will be in the meeting invite so we remember important topics. But you're always free to use the time for whatever's on your mind.
Again, I'm here for you. What do you think of this?
So this one caused a reaction to me because I've read books like, what is Kim Scott's, is it, or Kim
Candor, Radical.
Radical Candor, that's the book. And she talks about the space, or I've maybe, if not her, someone else mentions this idea of the one-on-one is your direct report's time, and it's their job to fill in the agenda with what's important to them. And I've struggled with that because when I've given that freedom to my direct reports, they don't prioritize it, right? It becomes something where we go into this meeting and it is their time, right? And I'm sitting there, but I had this expectation. Maybe I need to adjust, but I have an expectation of some structure, right? Some sense of things. So I adapted from that. Like, I used to have a very here's the 15 tasks that or projects that we're working on, very task oriented, right? I went completely the opposite direction to people, right? And them telling me what they wanted. And I had to try to find this balance in the middle on the agenda where there's some key things that are important. What are you thinking about? What
are your roadblocks? What are the
what can we celebrate, right? Or is anything that you've got questions about, any feedback? And it just became these 4 dot points, or these 4 big questions that stayed the same on every one. That created enough space for us to have very lengthy conversations.
We've had, in my time as a manager, we had different tools that we were using. We had one called Small Improvements, and there was elements around that the meeting agenda would pop up. So there was some automation around this, and you would set the kind of core framework. Again, it wasn't a hard and fast rule. It wasn't a checklist that you were having to complete at the end of the month, but it was just this light touch framework that helped set the scene. So it's not all of the responsibility on the report to actually come in and say, here's what I want to talk about. It's the here's just the light framework around it. So I think that's the kind of middle ground that makes sense, right? It's like these are the kind of broad strokes that we're going to talk about. What's going well, what's not going well. And from there, I think you've got some good jumping off points for a conversation. It's helpful.
Do you include professional development conversations in your regular one-on-ones, or do you schedule those separately?
Oh, it's been a while. That comes back to point number one, right? Whose time is it? And is it there as their time or your time? I wouldn't say a hard and fast no. I think a lot of that will depend on how the conversation goes. If somebody comes to you and says this is not going well and it points towards a performance issue or a skills gap or something, absolutely happy to address that. But if there was a specific thing that I was wanting to talk to them about, I mean, my approach for this is usually, do you mind if I give you some feedback about something? And the context of where and when that happens will probably the situation. If it was something that was super concerning, then I might well schedule that separately or talk to them and say, hey, I've got a thing that we need to talk about. We can talk about it here and now if you wish, or we can schedule another time. What would you like to do? So, I mean, there's a thing coming up in the list around surprises. I think that's kind of where I lean, is try to reduce the number of surprises. So I wouldn't ever spring that on a one-to-one where we have a generally set structure, but if it came naturally through the conversation, then I wouldn't shy away from it.
I was thinking more like career development or career advancement, career progression conversations. Would you include those in one-on-ones or have a separate meeting?
So I wouldn't shy away from it. It wasn't generally something that was on the core agenda, and so I think in the cadence of how you do some of these things, it's going to vary from business to business, size, availability of time. But I think again, if it comes up in the context of where you are wanting to go, there's only so many hours in the day, but it's not something that would generally be on the core agenda. But if you have a cadence of feedback, if you have, I mean, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. But it's not something that at the end of every week. It again also depends on the cadence of your one-to-ones. If you're only meeting someone once a month, A, why? But B, you've got to shoehorn a lot of stuff in there if the gaps between your meetings are wide. If you're meeting a lot more regularly, I feel like you would have a stronger relationship. You would know more about that person. It would be a lot easier to roll that stuff in.
Cool. All right. I could say more, but we've got what, 9 more promises to get through. So
Yep.
Promise number 3, when I schedule a meeting with you, I'll always say when I schedule it what it's meant to be about. I will not schedule meetings without an agenda.
Gold. Absolute gold. This doesn't have to be with a one-to-one. If I'm creating a meeting with anybody, I mean, and my agenda might be a comment in the description that says we need to talk about this, 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 and this. It's not a formal structured. I've got friends that love that kind of detail and will fill in the whole thing and will actually have that plan and almost have it timed. And I'm like, I'm not that person, but that sense of what is this meeting for?
So it
Critical.
goes back to that idea of no surprises, that and just people's own, imaginations, right? I tend to, because of imposter syndrome, if somebody says, like, and I've had this happen, a people leader, someone said, hey, can you just schedule a 15-minute with me or schedule a chat, or hey, I want to talk to you a little bit later, and I get nothing else, right? That is for me, that is the worst, because my mind just starts going crazy. I did something wrong. Somebody's given negative feedback. And keep in mind, this is all based probably on past experiences and past work trauma, right?
Sure.
So
Trauma, PTSD.
my mind just cannot get it to be a positive thing. It will always end up being a negative thing in my mind. And because of that, right, it's really challenging. And I just think it's a good rule of thumb, regardless, that if you're scheduling a meeting with somebody, give them clarity about what it's about, because that's so important,
I have a
right?
story. The meeting in which I learned that my role was being made redundant was titled Catch Up.
Mm,
And the only clue, and I was oblivious, had no idea that's what was coming. The only clue that I had was you can bring someone to this meeting if you want, which is a thing in HR culture
yeah.
here, that if there's big changes afoot. Again, didn't really grok that. Just blithely going about my life, and then I'm like, oh, why would I need to do that? Show up to the call. CEO, COO, bombshell.
Mm,
you know? And they know very quickly how I felt about that. And I gave them very strong feedback about that. And I do hope desperately that in the situations where they've had to go through that since, which they have, that they've been able to learn from that and be
mm.
more direct. But yeah, no surprises, please. No surprises, good or bad.
I have a similar story. I got
Yeah.
off a plane, then went on a train, then ended up back home, had late night, a little bit of sleep, jet lag the next morning. First meeting of the day was post event catch up, and it was HR, manager, and me being made redundant. Right, like it was, and I had no clue. I had spent that morning gathering my thoughts, putting together my list of things to
Here's
chat
where we
about.
go
Like it
next.
was
Yeah.
completely out of the blue. Yeah, just talk back and forth about the best ways to do that, but
That's another
yeah,
that's another podcast
another
episode. But yeah,
podcast.
that sense of I'll always say what it's meant to be about.
Mm.
I
It's a
get that
good,
it's difficult. I get that it's difficult, but
yeah, it's a good lead in, I think, to number 4, the fourth promise, which is when I drop into your DMs, I'll always say hi and why. No suspense, no small talk while you are wondering what I want.
that's an interesting one, right? Because there is that dynamic when you are somebody's manager, that sense of authority
Mm-hmm.
that first, and certainly for some people who are more sensitive than others, that first sense of, oh crap, what have I done?
Yep.
What's wrong here? So again, I think that's critical, but I think that whole sense of when I drop into your DMs and just drop a hi,
Yep.
like I want to uh, reach down Slack and go, what are you trying to do to me? That's not just for manager, that's just for anybody. But
It's interesting that this manager promises no small talk while you're wondering what I want. So there's no like, hey, what'd you get up to at the weekend? Blah blah blah. How are things going? It's like, hi, I want to talk to you about this. Da 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 da. How are you doing? What's going on? Oh, I'm good. What about that specifically? Are you after? Like it's just
well,
it's
we're here
a
to
bit of
do
etiquette,
business, right?
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I will. I mean, I'm really good at written comms, so I
Mm,
will often soften things up, but I'll never do it that needs a response. That becomes
right.
the thing. It'll be, "Hi, hope you had a great weekend. Hey, I saw this on and I did this. I need to talk to you about this." Da, 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 da. So I'll soften it up, but it's not a thing where it's time wasting to try and avoid getting to the point, or
Mm.
it's. But there is that sense of I'm making it connect. I'm connecting with it and with you personally, but I have a thing that I need or that we
One
need to talk
thing
about.
you and I have spoken a little bit about is cultural differences, where
Mm-hmm.
in some cultures being that direct is actually not how you
Yeah,
do things, right?
yeah,
And can be considered rude. And obviously within the context, this promise is probably one you've got to consider as well. If you're
yeah,
in a global company, figuring out what your ways of working are and working together to,
yeah.
agree on those is really important. Get those working agreements in place.
Yeah.
All right. Next, number 5. This one's interesting. News or announcements that significantly impact you, your work, or your team will come from me directly in a one-on-one, not revealed in a big meeting.
Okay, so that relies on the company further up not doing that to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a valiant promise to make. I don't know that it's always
Feasible?
possible. I think
Yeah.
I think if I was, however, and I don't know if I had this in mind when I was made redundant. I was managing 9 people
Mm.
at the time that I was made redundant. And what that one of the changes was, I mean, we all know that managing 9 people is probably not sustainable if you're trying to do other things. So there was the sense of my role change was also going to be one in which there were a lot of people that I had been managing and had really good relationships with that would then go on to be managed by someone else. And so communicating that, it was really important for me when we were going through that process and I was outlining to my managers, here's how I want. And I gave them a timeline. It's actually a pretty good story at the end of the day about how it all did play out for everybody's benefit in the end. But I laid out this timeline. Okay, so in this period, let's figure out what this is going to look like. In this period, this is when I'm going to communicate this to the team. And then in this period, here's what we're going to do. So that it wasn't the sense of, oh, hi, Dee's role's changing. She's not going to be your manager anymore. That was information that I was communicating directly to my reports. And I think it was very important to me.
I didn't get the option on that. I was told my role was being made redundant, and I, at least in one instance, this happened. My role was made redundant, and my manager actually told my direct reports. They didn't in meetings. Didn't tell me that they were doing that. So, yeah.
So that was your role being made redundant and your tenure with the company was ending,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, so my role was being made redundant and I was being offered an alternative role. So this wasn't me leaving the company. Here's how things are going to change. So there is a difference in that. It's not Dee's been made redundant or you're being made redundant and you finish now and so we had a lot of time to go, this is a company structural change. This is what's going to happen. Here's how it's going to play out. And I was actually able to have a hand in making that work. So yeah, there is a difference there. But
Here's one another promise that we've spoken about a lot recently. Number 6 is you'll get feedback from me when it's fresh. There will be
yes,
no feedback in your performance review that you're hearing for the first time.
yeah,
Just straight
yeah.
up, absolutely right. There's not much else to say here. I mean, we've done 2 episodes.
We've got stories, but yeah. I learned that one the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever do that to anybody because it'll bite you.
And it's really important. So I had an interesting conversation with my wife today, who had an experience with her manager at the weekend. They were doing this big event and for their workplace, and her manager came in, and after a wildly successful event where they had more people showing up than they were expecting, the manager came in and didn't acknowledge any of the effort or the work that had been done, right, and just went into like the tasks of what needed to happen or what was missing or what needed to
Yeah,
get fixed. And just, in some ways they have such a good relationship that it's almost like this expectation that it's going to be good, right? It's almost like
yeah,
there's this expectation that, yeah, of course, why would we need to talk about you doing a great job? You're always doing a great job, right? That's sort of like it's a weird thing, but she was able to she was sort of taken back, right? Like about with that sort of just feedback dump, and was able to go back to her manager a couple hours later and say, "Hey, by the way, that was not cool the way that you gave
yeah,
that feedback, and it made me feel like this, and you didn't even acknowledge the hard work that we'd done at all,
yeah.
right? Like it just really did not land the way that I think you thought it was
Celebrate
going to
the
land,
wins.
right?
Celebrate the wins.
Celebrate the
Yeah,
wins." And he just went, "You're absolutely right. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry." Right?
Yeah.
Acknowledged it right away. But because there was the feedback, because the situation was fresh, it was a lot easier for that feedback to be given and
Yeah.
acknowledged, and you know, for somebody to go back and reflect on because it was fresh. If
Yeah.
when we hold things and we wait to give it until, it's at a designated time, that's challenging. And I'll say,
I think it relies on there being a culture where that of that continuous learning
mhm,
culture, right? Where people go, yeah, I am open to being wrong. I'm being open to being told that I'm wrong, which is of course is a two-way street. But yeah.
I think it's also a bit of a personality thing too. There are people out there who thrive in structure and are also
Hmm.
bound by structure, right?
Right.
And what we have to do as people leaders in those situations is make sure that we're able to identify those people who are bound by structure and create the permission where it needs to be slotted in for them to be able to do it. When you are a leader of leaders, if you have somebody who is bound by process, right? And that's not necessarily a negative thing, right? You need those kinds of
Mm.
people and they're incredibly valuable. But if you know of one of your managers who's managing others who is bound by process, one of the things you'll have to navigate with them is that sort of fresh feedback thing and coming up with a
Mm.
system with them that empowers and enables them to be able to provide fresh
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah.
So just something else to think about, not just about managing direct reports, but that next layer of managing managers as well.
Yeah. I think I was just scanning ahead to the rest of the list to see if what I was thinking in relation to your wife's experience was there is also a sense too of as a manager knowing what motivates and demotivates your team.
Mm,
So for a team, in the situation where that balloon burst of here's all of this feedback, like I think if you're an aware manager, knowing going into that and being able to, yeah, I mean the point of that story, I guess, is the being able to go back and give that feedback at the time and being open to being that feedback. I sit there and hear that story and go, oh, all I can feel is the crushing
mm-hmm.
balloon pop of, oh, my moment is gone. That is so demotivating for me. That just becomes a spiral of, oh, why do I even bother? Blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
So yeah, addressing those in the moment's important.
and you're absolutely
Uh,
right. And that's how she responded, and that's how she felt,
yeah,
and
yeah,
very honestly and openly, and it's we can talk a little. I mean, this is an aside, but like, being somebody who talks about this kind of stuff and lives and breathes, people and culture, and then my
yeah,
spouse, my partner, is somebody who navigates some of these things. It's like, she talks to me a lot about like just methodologies and ways of approaching these situations as spouses and partners do. Like that's just part of
yeah,
how you do life together. But it's been really interesting the more I've leaned into this sort of people and culture stuff, that she's
yeah.
felt more permission to talk about these kinds of things, and we've been able to
That's
navigate
awesome.
that kind of stuff together. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's that's fresh feedback. It's that the right feedback. It's
yeah,
all those kinds of things. Oh, this one is it. This next promise is a really good one, and I think it's one that's important for all of us. It's easier in outcome oriented workplaces and probably more white collar environments, which most of us are if you're listening to this podcast. But I trust you to manage your own time. So this is the seventh promise. I trust you to manage your own time. You don't need to clear with me in advance your time away from your keyboard or out of office.
yeah. Why am I thinking about that so hard? I think there are elements around this. My first thought was, but what about booking holidays
Mm-hmm.
and how that's going to affect my clients? I do kind of need to clear that. And we
Mm.
have structures in the company that I'm with now where, depending on how long you're planning to take off, kind of affects how much notice you need to give. But if you're sitting at your keyboard and you're ducking off to make a cup of tea, the whole sense of having to drop into Slack and say, oh, I'm AFK for 10 minutes. I mean, so it's finding that balance, I think. Like, I wouldn't have any expectation on, or I need to go out for 2 hours to go to I wouldn't clear that in advance. Somebody to clear that in advance. Because again, so long as the work's getting done, it's that start with trust. Sorry, now I'm brain dumping it as I figure. The important word on that line is trust, right? I trust you. We've got stuff that we need to get to. I know that we're going to get to it. So all of the stuff in between is not monumentally important.
So as a leader, the question you need to ask yourself as you react to these things is, do you trust your team to manage their time? And if not, why not? And what
Yeah.
do you as a manager need to do or consider or change about your approach in order to be able to grant that trust? Because you as a leader, as a people leader, as a manager, you don't need to know when somebody's taking 2 hours to go to haircut and dentist appointments in the middle of the day, right?
Yeah.
If you're in a workplace that's outcome driven and it's not impacting deadlines in a negative way, and there's no dependencies that are being messed up as a result of that, you know, it's fine. And again, you've got to have the right systems in place, you've got to have the right controls in place, and it does depend role to role how that's going to go. If you're dealing with clients or you're dealing with deadlines and you've got dependencies, that changes the impact, right? And a good people leader is looking not just at that one-on-one relationship, but the whole impact of the team and their work and their deliverables on the rest of the project or the
Mm.
group or the business. So there's more things to go. But where for me I think is important is you don't need to ask permission to go on holiday, right? Or to take time away or to have a mental health day. You just need to let me know that you're not going to be in, and that's enough. I don't need to know
Yeah.
the specifics of your sick day, right? Or your
Yeah.
your your leave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're going on annual leave and like good, like you don't need to ask my permission to go on annual leave, but I would like to have advanced notice if it's a lengthier annual leave. But you can work
Yeah.
that out in your working agreements and your ways of working
Yeah.
together as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other thoughts on that?
No, no. It's that whole start with trust. And so long as you've got all the checks and balances in place, that if that trust, it's on both sides to maintain that, right?
So
So
we've
if
we've
your
mentioned it a few
direct report,
times.
yeah.
Yeah,
Have we got an
about
episode about that start with trust thing? That was early on, right? I've lost kind of track, but
I think it might
anyway,
have been in
that's,
our remote leadership one,
yeah.
where we talked about that. It's a thread. We've got two threads that we mention or two slogans that we mention in every episode. Start with trust, and leadership is intentional. I
Assume,
think those two are
yeah.
the things that keep coming up
Yeah.
time and again. Well, we've talked a little bit
Anyway,
about.
number eight, your work gets done your way. My focus is on outcomes, not output. Once we're clear on where we need to go, how to get there is up to you. If I ever find it necessary to suggest a specific approach, I will supply an example. Interesting.
It's a
Yeah, I think. What do you
Go ahead.
think? No, you go ahead.
Well, I think it's the segue from what we talked about in promise number 7, right? Where I trust you to manage your own time. You can do that when your focus is on outcomes, not output,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Those two go hand in hand, and it's not always
yeah,
possible in every role. The Yeah, I mean, it's like we were just saying, it starts with trust. This is a trust driven approach to getting work done, in my
yeah.
opinion.
Well, and it's also indicative of hiring people that know their stuff, or hiring
Mm,
people that have skills that you don't have. If you go, this is the point at which we get to, how do we get there? Talk me through how we get there. Or and I think in project management too, obviously a bunch of different ways that people approach project management. Some of them will be around particular frameworks, specifically if you're jumping into agile, that there are, guidelines around that. And, particularly in the kind of cadence and structure of meetings and the way that you structure and build up the work.
Mm-hmm.
But within that, the way that you work with your team, the way that you interact with your clients, that all comes, every person brings their own different approach to that. And you've been hired to get a project from, at least me as a project manager, hired to get the project from start to finish. And so, yeah, again, that whole sense of I'm not top down telling you micromanaging about what you should do. That's what this is. I am not a micromanager, and we love that. I love that at any rate. Don't want to speak for you. I presume you don't want to be a micromanager.
Well, let's keep going. I'm just conscious of time, and our listeners are spending their time here. We've got 3 more to go. Number 9, a team is strongest when it's working together, looking after one another and taking care of each other. Please look to your left and to your right for opportunities to help your colleagues. Please ask for help when you need it. Nobody works alone. Ooh.
I know, right? It's powerful and rare. How rare is that?
Mm-hmm. This is a
So
huge culture building one.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
How good would it feel to know that you're working in a company when the managers are saying to the team, nobody works alone? Look to your left and your right. How do you do that in a remote company? I mean, that sounds like an episode to me in and of itself, but how that sense of, I've got your back. I'm here with you. I'm not trying to undercut you. Like, we're in this together and let's get there together. I mean, that's tear inducing. That's beautiful. And I wish it wasn't as rare as it is.
There's something about it, like just thinking practically about how this could look, right? Like for you as a people leader, I think part of it is shared ownership, right? That you have, if you're following number 8, which is about outcomes, not output, then how the work gets done is less important than the outcome of is there. And so if you're not worrying about when people are working or all of those kinds of things and how the work gets done, then you're actually giving your team permission to work together. And there's no reason why, Rahul and Jack can't work together on something and bring in, Sally or Hannah to support that and get it done, right? Like it's all in that approach. I would love to say that, none of us create our own silos, but I think we all naturally do, right? Yeah. Especially in remote work where you are alone, right? Yeah. And you sort of self-serve and you have to be at least to some degree self-sufficient in getting things done.
Yeah.
Being able to put your hand up and say you need help.
Well, also, I think this is where in Agile or in a Scrum where you have a Scrum Master who's responsible both for clearing blockages to allow the team to do their work, but then also to be coaching and building that team. It's also having that approach of being able to see that and to prompt people, because it's not always the first thing that somebody will think to do. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm stuck on this thing. Or you can see somebody who's gone quiet because they're clearly churning through something, and again, we're in software development. So if it's, stuck on a gnarly piece of code that they're struggling with, just that having that moment to go, hey, so-and-so, and being able to see that and make and facilitate those connections rather than always. And I think the more as a manager and coach that you're doing that it also kind of helps build up that sense of, helping each other and facilitating that. All right.
We've got 2 more.
2 to go.
Number 10, I trust you to skip level and talk to my manager or other senior management about anything you feel is relevant. You don't need to clear it with me, and I'm not going to get weird about it when you do.
How secure is this guy?
I mean, like, are they the top leader in their business? Like, let's be real here. who isn't going to feel a little weird when like there's
But
for
don't make it weird for the report. Sure.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, you might not even know. I mean, you might not even know that they're doing that. But
yeah,
giving somebody permission to say, and that you're not going to make it weird for them,
yeah.
that's really helpful. Even if you do perhaps maybe a little bit feel weird, you wouldn't put that on the report.
I've had my managers schedule one-on-ones with my team as just part of their regular routine and their catch up. And when it's part of the systemic way that they work, right? It takes a little bit of that weirdness out of it,
Mm,
right? And I also think when you've got a strong relationship with your manager,
yeah,
that becomes less of a weird thing because you're already talking about that anyway. Yeah, I'm going to ask them
yeah,
about how it is to work with you. Yes, I'm going to ask
yeah.
them about their work.
Well, of course, they're
Yes,
managing you. They need to
yeah,
know how you're doing. Yeah,
exactly. Right? And when it's a direct report going to them, I'm hoping that if there's anything I need to hear, my manager is going to tell me about it, right?
yeah,
Because again, if we're operating with no surprises,
yeah,
that conversation is going to be open. And what's really cool is if you can get into a spot where your direct reports have a strong enough relationship with your people leader that that becomes part of their professional development and the replacing of you, right? I'm always a big fan of replacing yourself in a role. So
yeah,
like, hey, if I've got two or three of my direct reports who have this really strong relationship with my manager, then if I'm on leave for 3 weeks, any one of
yeah,
them can jump in
yeah,
and and do what they need to do in order to keep things moving forward. And my manager as well doesn't feel weird or
yeah,
awkward about connecting with my team directly and
yeah,
following up on things, right? I don't want to be a blocker to that relationship.
yeah.
I actually want to be a facilitator of that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. That sense of we're part of a bigger whole, we're part of the bigger organism. And I think you can see this and I think what this is also saying is it's speaking against that top-down hierarchical controlling leadership where somebody's insecurity means that I need to hold all of this to myself because I
Mm-hmm.
can't let that be any wider because that will impact me and my security.
Mm,
So, and I think it's interesting because I went when I was with Human Made, I started when the company was about 40 people.
mm,
And by the time that I left, we were over or just over 100. So
wow.
we had gone through that transition where we were all pretty much managed directly by the CEO and then had introduced this management and leadership structure. And so that was a really big transition for Tom, the CEO, because he'd been in this space where he was getting to see everybody and meet with everybody and feel like part of that. And then as you abstract that leadership into, that those new layers, he was not having that opportunity. And I don't
Mm,
want to speak for him, but that sense of still being able to maintain the connection with the people that are building your company, I think is important, and our ability as managers to hold that as important as well, I think is where he's going with that.
all right. Last one. Number 11. 11th promise. I will attribute credit appropriately to you and your team. I will never exaggerate my own role or minimize your contribution. I'll be especially certain to nail down attribution when senior management are hearing of our accomplishments. I mean,
I
this
hate
speaks, it feels
I was
like
going to say
personal
this is a
trauma.
no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
This is the dream.
Mm,
I wish it was reality for everyone.
yeah. It definitely comes across as a bit of a reaction, probably to some situations they've been in where
Yeah,
some things have
yeah,
happened.
maybe.
I mean, I can't not agree with it. I've had
Yeah,
these situations where you know, it hasn't felt like my contribution has been acknowledged, right? Or,
yeah,
but I've also had situations where it's been very much acknowledged and I get to
yeah.
celebrate those achievements as like these pinnacle moments of my career. So, yeah, no, it's good.
I think the whole list speaks to self-awareness,
Mm,
maturity, confidence and security in and of that leader's self, and doing their best to be the kind of leader that has that sense of I'm here for you, has that sense of servanthood, and is not about there being a people manager, or there being a manager of this is something that builds up me, and this is our relationship is something that benefits me. Like, we're here to do a job. I am open and expansive enough in and of myself to be able to bring you into that, and for us to be here together moving this company forward. And I think that's what I loved about it. I mean, this is 2 years old now, and it's timeless for me in that sense of I want to be, as a people manager, the best person to bring the people that I'm with, elevate them, see them grow. Because when we all do, it's that rising tide lifts all boats. Where that sense of we all grow and achieve together. We all get where we need to go together. We are better together. And I can't let my insecurities restrict that. So I will be expansive. At least that's what I like to think. I look at that and go, this is the kind of person that I want to be. This is the leader I want to have.
Leader I want to have, leader I want to be. Well, we're going to stop here because we've been going for a while now and we've got through all 11. Woohoo.
We did.
I'm curious.
What do you think? I'd love to hear what they think.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious to our listeners and viewers, do you agree with these 11? Are there any that you would change, any that you would add? And what do you think it takes to create an environment where all of these can happen at the same time? Look at your own leadership, look at your own workplace, and if you don't have control over the whole company, what's in your control that you can actually do? And maybe you're not even a manager, you're just somebody who is passionate about culture and team, and you're like, even yourself, are there things here that you can be doing on this list now that set you up for that kind of culture and workplace you want to be in later on?
I love how Matthew finishes off. Sorry to cut you off because I know you were just about to sign off there. I love how he finishes off. If we trust each other, we can learn and grow together. That's how I want to work with you.
Trust.
It's a great sign off, and I think it encapsulates it all together well. Thanks, James. It's been fun talking about it.
No worries. And we'll revisit all of these, I think, in future episodes because they're all great things. But on that note, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, do those things that you need to do. Share this with all of your amigos, your friends, your compadres, your chingus, whatever it takes. And we will see you next time on the next episode. Very excited to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.
And scene.